Pubs and reopening, and that's been the real focus, hasn't it, Darren Grimes, for an awful lot of the last few weeks. This big date, 12th of April. I mean, basically, as a general rule, I don't trust anyone who didn't have that date marked in their diary. I think that's a good way of deciding who your real friends are or not. But we are looking at quite a lot of big changes today. We've got not just pubs, bars and restaurants reopening, outdoors only, but all shops indoors opening, hairdressers, beauty salons, gyms and spas, zoos, theme parks, other outdoor attractions, libraries and community centres. Weddings are allowed for up to 15 people. This is rather useful because my brother is getting married this Saturday with the said 15 people. Funerals 30 people, wakes 15. Care home visitors are allowed to be increased to 2 per resident. Again, a lot of residents not getting even 1 at the moment. Big issue there. Driving lessons are resumed today. The same household can holiday in a rented accommodation or a campsite, and indoor children's activities carry on. However, we are still at rule of 6 or 2 households when it comes to only meeting outside, still banned inside. It's a bit of a mishmash, isn't it, Darren? And it's interesting that the Prime Minister has said, behave responsibly and enjoy freedom, but don't overdo it, which I find, really very patronising indeed today.
Oh, absolutely. And during the break there, I heard adverts from the government just putting the fear of God into people, right? And
1 in 3 people have COVID and don't know it.
Absolutely, exactly. And you're right to use the word patronising, because I think a lot of it has been patronising and condescending, and actually suggests that the government don't trust the British people to take leave of their senses. And I don't know, what are we going to do, Julia? Start spitting in people's faces? It's a deranged line of thinking that suggests that we're not autonomous creatures with our own agency.
Yeah. Of all the people I know who've had to self-isolate the most times, having come into contact with the people who've had COVID, it's politicians. We had one person in the whole of Talk Radio who got COVID, and then there were some people who had to self-isolate, and none of whom ever got sick at all. It's our entire office in the last year, for goodness sake. And yet politicians, Emmanuel Macron, you think of France, but Keir Starmer's had to self-isolate 3 times. What on earth are they all doing? Clearly not being responsible.
Yeah, well, quite. But yesterday I was struck by, I heard someone say that we're getting back to normal today. And Julia, if this is normal, I don't know what dystopia looks like, because I am excited to get, and I will be going to the pub, as you can well imagine, tonight. But
hey, I'm beating you. We're going at 10.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think we should ever assume that this is normal, though. And I really do think that it's shameful, to be honest with you, the way in which the British people have been browbeaten and scared to the extent that they actually consider what we are going through today, as far as the rule of 6 is concerned, and having to sit outside. And I'm here in County Durham. It's not going to be warm tonight, put it that way. And we're all still going out and doing these things, but this isn't normal.
No, exactly. I know some rival radio stations calling this a great unlocking. Again, this I'm
well, that's why people don't listen to them, Julia.
Well, there is that. But I refuse to be grateful for being allowed to do things as a free-born citizen of a Western democracy and an adult, that I should be able to do at any time and make my own choices. Now, people I know who are wary, various elderly members of my family will not be going to pubs or restaurants, or they're being careful because they feel they're at higher risk. They're waiting for second jabs and the things. But that's their choice, and they would be making those choices anyway. I don't see why someone at your age, who's at as close to zero risk of COVID as one could possibly be, should be stopped from doing things. But also, crucially, and we are going to be talking about this during the show, only 40% of pubs can reopen today and have outdoor space. Most restaurants don't have outdoor space, and even those pubs that can reopen can't break even. They're not making a profit. They're going to be operating at a loss. So for goodness sake, if you are in the pub, buy expensive stuff, people. Seriously, tip really, really well. Be generous with your dosh if you've been earning money during the last year, because these people are really going to need it. And you don't sit and just nurse half a pint for 3 hours. But that's just not fair, because and it's just so unfair. But the idea that you can go to the hairdressers, someone can do some sort of really close-up treatment for you, in a hairdresser's indoors, but you can't sit indoors in the pub. I'm sorry. I do think it's a nonsense, and I think it makes a mockery of things, and yet so much support for this. And yet again, Sky and the BBC, as usual, all weekend, they have on people, medics saying, well, this reopening's happening too fast. And you think, what drugs are you on? Yeah,
and something you just said there struck me, because I think, and don't get me wrong, I will be the first person to criticize my generation when it comes to sort of this snowflake, censorious mentality that many of us seem to have. But actually, I have been sickened and saddened by the way in which we have been treated and dismissed as being mere vectors of the
Yeah.
virus, as opposed to people who have disproportionately taken job losses, disproportionately suffered new or pre-existing mental health issues, and disproportionately are in pretty crap housing and have had to endure that during this year of lockdown.
Yeah.
So whilst I'm the first person to criticise my generation, I do actually think it's about time we would cut a little bit of
Yeah.
slack
I tell
for
you,
what we've gone through.
absolutely. And I tell you what, if over the relaxing of travel restrictions, and I've been looking at, where on earth can we go? Me and my holidays. And there are lots of countries that may well allow people to go, say like for Israel. So we'd be allowed to leave this country, we'd be able to legally go there and not have quarantine and the like. But those countries are requiring 2 jabs. If a whole bunch of people in their 70s, if my parents are able to go off on a holiday because they've been prioritised on the vaccine queue, and a bunch of young people aren't, sorry, I think all hell will kick off, and it should kick off, because that is just not fair. I just say, I think your generation and younger have lost out so much more and sacrificed so much more than any other generation. But in terms of the other big sort of political story this weekend, is David Cameron finally breaking his silence about his relationship with the financier Lex Greensill. The former Prime Minister has insisted in a very lengthy statement that he hadn't broken any rules, but he said that the value of his shares in the Greensill's collapsed company was nowhere near this sort of $60 million figure that people have talked about. But we've had so many revelations over the weekend about his attempts to lobby Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, the Health Secretary Matt Hancock, who went on a lovely cosy drink with David Cameron and Lex Greensill. There are big question marks about let's be honest, the tackiness of a former Prime Minister using his contacts within the Treasury, within the Civil Service and within the Cabinet to try and basically make money for his mate and himself.
Yes, and I think you've got to go back to 2009 to actually get a sense of just how rotten, I guess, this looks, and actually, frankly, hypocritical, because he was the first political leader, I think, to put his finger on the pulse of the nation and really recognise how big a story the expenses scandal was going to blow up to be. And he, really beat that drum, and eventually, of course, was able to form a coalition government off of, many would argue, the back of that sentiment of the Labour Party being viewed as being completely out of touch, and the economy obviously on its knees as well. But he was focused really on arguing that the system was rotten and the system was gameable by those at the top at the expense, ultimately, of the hard-pressed taxpayer.
Yeah.
So this all doesn't look great, does it, Julia?
No, I mean, my views on this is that if he thought that he could sort of send loads of text messages and get meetings because he was the former Prime Minister, everyone would have to, pay attention to him, and he could make money for his mate. And of course, the company would be bailed out, and then he'd be in for a big windfall. Well, I don't care whether it was, 1 million or 30 million, the same difference. But it says to me that A, he wasn't a very good lobbyist, and B, I think this must have been how things operated when he was Prime Minister. This was how he did businesses. This is how he expected George Osborne, his Chancellor, to do business. That if someone was a mate, someone you were at uni with, or someone you'd worked with, got in touch, who wanted it at a money making deal, you just got in touch to use your contacts. And maybe that's how it's always been done. Probably is how it's always been done. But it's a bit, I don't know. It's just a bit rich, isn't it?
Yeah, it smacks of chimocracy, doesn't it? I think Mr. Cameron, it's easy to say, isn't one of Theresa May's, as she always liked to parrot, just about managing, is he? Right? He didn't need to ruin his reputation like this. I think history was about to remember him, Julia, as the Prime Minister of the EU referendum. But it looks like he's set to go down as the Prime Minister who once stood on a platform of cleaning up politics and looking really rather hypocritical in doing so.